Welcome back, everyone. I'm Jason and you're watching Jason Jensen Trains. Well, the photos you just saw are of my newest kit called Scrap A Metal. It's an HO scale kit. Now, this is my first limited edition kit. There will only be 150 kits produced. And actually, there's 151 counting the kit that I put together for this video. There's so many great features with this kit. It comes with over 25 detail parts. There's just so many great things to build in this kit, and you'll see in today's video. Now, the kit is currently available on my website at jasonjensentrains.com. Now, again, there's only 150 kits. So once they're gone, it's gone. All right, well, I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to show you how to build this kit. All right, let's get to it. Okay, the first thing we're going to do to get started is to spray paint these. This is our base, the foundation, and we're going to put a primer on that using this camouflage Rust-Oleum. I don't see where it says a color, but it's kind of a tan color. We're going to put that on the base. Then for the walls, we're going to spray this both sides with a gray primer. Now, you could do both with the gray primer. I just had this on hand, so I thought I would give it a try. Okay, the primer is all dried. I did both sides. Now the front, it can be kind of light because we're going to paint over it. But the back side, you want this to be kind of solid because that's going to be the interior color of the structure. I sprayed the tan on this and didn't really care for it. I was hoping it'd be a little darker, so then I just did a quick misting of the gray over it. Now it doesn't really matter because we're going to paint this to look like concrete, so really this is just a base coat to give the paint something to stick to. Let's start this project with a brand new blade, and I'll put a link in the description below for these. I buy 100 at a time, so take your time when doing this so that you're not accidentally cutting into the wall. Okay, I put down some cardboard so that you could see the pieces better. Now notice I just cut out these 6 pieces and left all the thin pieces in here. We'll get to that later. Okay, so this is the front, and this is the side, and we have the back. And then this one here goes in there like that. So we'll get this glued together and then I'll show you what it looks like, and then we'll finish it by gluing the side wall on and the back. I wanted to quick point out that I'm using one of my 1-2-3 blocks to make sure that it stays square, and again I'll put a link in the description below for those. And if your pieces are a little, just slightly bowed, just bend them, but be very careful. Just bend them very softly so that you don't completely bend it. Okay, then push it together and let it set up for a little bit. Don't worry about wiping the glue right away. Let it set up. Make sure that it's square. Keep pressing it together until it feels like it's drying, then go ahead and just take your finger real quick and wipe over that, and it seals that crack. Now you can see to glue in that L, I used 2 of the blocks. Now everything has tabs. I don't know if you can see that sticking out. And they fit inside the cutouts on here. So it's pretty easy. You can tell if it's upside down because it won't fit. It'll only fit a certain way. You want to make sure everything is nice and tight. And I say that because our thin pieces here get put on the corners. And then just take a brush and make sure you don't have any extra in the corners. Next, we'll cut out all of these thin pieces. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I didn't cut them all out. These 4 all have an angle at the top, and they're all the same length. They're flat at the bottom and an angle at the top. Let's see, this one right here, the short one, it also has an angle on it. So let's cut that one out. Okay, so there's 2 that are short. They're not the same length, but they have a slight angle at the top. And then all the rest of these are straight on both ends. I guess we are going to need the straight ones because we'll have to do an entire corner at a time. So like I said, go ahead and cut all of the rectangles, all of the thin pieces out, but let's try to keep them separated. So we have 4 with angled cut tops. We have 3 that are the same length that are straight at both ends. These 2 have slight angles cut at the top. That's a straight one. It's another straight one. And another straight one. Now they're different thicknesses, so we're going to have to be careful. And we have a small one. Okay, that's everything that's cut out of that. So we're done with this. Now, before we glue anything, we want to sort of test fit and lay everything out first. Now there's 4 of them like this. And we get 1 on the end, 1 in the center, 1 on the end here, and 1 on this one. So let's start with that. Now on the side, it'll get, there's 3 of them, and that'll get put like that. Okay, so let's start by gluing the straight one. Now you may want to take a little file if there's little nubs on there. Now you may want a small brush if you have any extra glue. Okay, so that's glued right there on the side, flush with the front. Now we're going to take this one and glue it on the corner. Now before we put our roof on, we can always take a file, and if we need to, we can file a small angle on there so that our roof card fits perfect on there. Okay, now let's do the same to this back corner. So first we'll take a straight one and glue it on the side. You know what, I'll do this corner in this corner and then come back and talk about putting one right here in the center. Okay, these two corners are done. I wanted to show you this corner because we're going to glue a straight piece right there. Now all these pieces will be numbered in the instructions, so you won't have to be guessing what goes where. It'll all be in the instructions. So we'll put that straight piece on first, then put the one with the angle cut at the top on there. Again, I know it's tempting to wipe the extra glue away right away, but keep pressing it down, letting that glue set up, and the more you press it, the more glue will ooze out. I don't know if you can see there. And trust me, it's not going to dry that fast, so you have time to wipe it. Just keep pressing it, making sure it's a nice tight fit. Then run your finger across it and it's sealed. You may want to keep a little dish with water that you can dip your fingers in and then wipe on a paper towel so that you don't end up getting all this dried, flaky paint on your fingers, because then it sticks to your building. So again, just keep going over it and pressing it and having that glue sort of ooze out. Take your brush, clean up your corner, then run your finger over it. Okay, now let's work on the front. The front gets a piece right down the center. But first, you want to take this little piece, the smallest piece of all of them, and it gets glued on the side right there. I'll try to put a link for some small files in the description if I can find them. Okay, there's that small piece glued in there, and you'll see there is an angle right here. So make sure the angle on that little piece lines up with the angle there, and the flat top, the straight side, is straight with the edge of the roof. Now alright, we just have two corners left. Okay, we have a thin one that has an angle, slight angle cut, and it matches the angle right there. Then we have this thick, tall, straight one, and it's the same thickness as these on the front, and that goes right there. Glue the one on the end first, that has the angle on it. File my little nubs. Like I said, these will all be numbered, and you'll have instructions to tell you what order to glue them in. But you're going to want to work on one corner at a time. Like, you're not going to want to glue end pieces on and then come back and glue these on. You want to do one corner at a time so that when your glue seeps out, you can spread it and sort of cover up the seam on the corner. Okay, one corner left. It's these two thin pieces, and one has a slight angle that matches that angle. So we'll file our nubs and make sure it's nice and flat smooth. Now that goes right to the edge, flush with the edge. And then this one will overlap like that. Okay, the main structure is put together. Oh, one more piece. Sorry. There is a piece, and I suppose it's optional, but there's a straight piece, and straight at the top and bottom, and you can put that right there. Or again, I guess you could leave it off. I think it looks better with it on. It makes the window look centered in between those two columns. Okay, next we're going to paint the outside of this, and we're going to use a sponge and two different colors, and I mix them, and it's 50-50, and it's Thicket, which is a bluish gray, and then Light Avocado, which is a green. And again, it's 50-50. Now don't worry about our corners. We'll come back in with a brush and work on those. And we're covering most of the gray. We're almost giving it a stucco look. Now if you want your corners to really blend in well, you can take a file first and lightly go over those and sort of blend it. Okay, the front and the side are done, so let's take a brush and we're going to dab the corners. And we're going to go pretty heavy because the corners would be more protected, so the paint wouldn't really chip. So we're almost going completely solid in the corners. And then you want to do the same on the doors and windows. And you can go solid on the inside of the windows and door frames. Hopefully you can see the texture. Okay, the outside color is all done. I did mix up some gray. I tried to match it as best as I could for the gray on the inside because some of the task board showing. And like I painted the edge of it right there, just so that all the edges are completely painted. Because you will be able to see inside. Now, if you wanted to, you could take a paintbrush and paint the inside a different color. If you wanted to have it a white or a lighter gray, a darker gray, black, but now would be the time if you wanted to do that, to paint that. I just recommend not using too much water so that it doesn't warp, but spraying both sides of it with the spray paint should prevent it from warping. Just be careful with getting it too wet. Okay, I've decided I'm actually going to paint the inside of mine. I'm using gray sky. So I'm going to mix it with slate gray. I want it to be kind of light in there because we have a lot of details that go on the inside. And once we get the roof cards put on the top, it's going to make it really dark inside. So this may look really light now, but it's definitely going to get darker once we get the roof put on top. You can see I'm not doing it completely solid. Okay, this part is done. Okay, the structure sits on the base just like this. It's important that there's a hole right here, and you don't want to cover up that hole. It sits right next to it. And then it does hang off a little bit on this end. That's okay. This piece, which when you get it, is right here. So you cut that off, then that gets moved and glued to the center. There's a structure that we build that gets put right on the center of that wall. So we're not going to glue this on yet, but we are going to paint the base. But I want to show you where it goes so that you can do maybe tire marks, oil drips, stuff like that. Now, there is another structure that we build that sits over here, and it is a small garage, like maybe a single car garage that is going to be used for supplies, but we'll probably have the doors open, so we'll want maybe tire marks and again maybe some oil drips, but it's important to know that that sits right there. We're going to use chalk paint Cocoon, and we may want to set this on here and draw a pencil line so that we know where it goes. Now there's another hole back here in the corner, and you don't want to cover that up. There's a fence that gets put on here that goes in those holes. Very lightly I'm going to draw the front of the garage on there. Okay, well, as you can see, I am just taking my sponge and sponging it, and you want to rotate it so that you don't get a repeat pattern. Okay, here's where we're at so far. We'll come in later with pastel chalks and add some weathering, put some oil drips. Oh, and real quick, so I didn't forget, I took my file and slowly went over at that angle, and even this one. And you can see where it filed down those corners so that it's a nice angle, so then when we put that rooftop on, it'll sit on there really nice. So the more I looked at this, it was just too almost white. It just was too bright, so I made a really thin wash of neutral gray, very thin, a lot of water. Went over it really quick because I didn't want water to sit on it, because I didn't want any of this to warp. And then I even did a light wash. I did some streaking on the walls, and I don't know if you can see it. Okay, so I'm a little more happy with this. It'll look even better once we get some value with some pastels on it. Okay, so here are the wood walls, and we're just going to cut them out, and then we need to brace them on the back. Okay, all the walls are cut out. These four are for the structure that sits in the back corner, and these three are for the structure that sits on the side of the building here. Okay, so you want to brace the back of these walls with the strip wood that's marked with red on the ends. And there's a guide in the instructions that will show you exactly where to put the bracing. Okay, we've got all the bracing glued on, and I'm just going to put weights on it and let it dry. Okay, while that's drying, let's cut out our fence posts. Here are the fences. So we need to cut these all out so that we can spray paint this. And we don't want to spray paint it while it's in the frame because the sides won't get painted. Where if we cut these out, we know that the sides are all going to get painted. Be careful cutting these out. Take your time because you don't want to break them. You don't want to snap them. It's actually easier to tell from the back where all the little tabs are. Okay, these pieces here, you can cut them out, but they get painted a different color. They are for the water tank that gets put up on top of the roof. Okay, so we're done with this. Just set these aside in a safe place so that we can use them later. Now there's also a couple gates. There's 3 gates on here that get painted the same color. There's a double gate, and then a single gate. There's a line on here that the laser didn't cut all the way through, so I'm just going over it. So if that happens in your kit, don't try to snap the piece out because you risk breaking it. Just keep going over it until you cut through. Here again, there's 2 little lines the lines at the top here you can see they're not all the way through. If you hold it up to the light, it's almost all the way through, so a few passes and it'll come out. But again, if that happens, don't try to force it out. Just make a couple or a few cut lines and they'll just come right out. Okay, so here are your fence posts. Then you have a gate that goes right there. Okay, so we'll paint all this, and again, it's up to you. I'm going to make this look like metal, like there's square metal welded posts, and then we have screen fencing material that gets put on it too. I'm going to spray this with a reddish brown primer, and then we'll dry brush some gunmetal gray. Now keep in mind you need to do both sides. Okay, I sprayed both sides of all the fencing, and then sprayed this the same color, and that's the doors and windows. Okay, we'll set these aside and work on staining our wood walls. Okay, we're going to stain all of our walls and our strip wood. We have corner trim and trim that goes underneath the overhang of the roof. And we're using murky brown. It is from besttrains.com. Okay, we're going to sponge our walls using sand gray. And we'll go heavier at the top and lighter at the bottom. Alright, all of our wood is painted, and now we're going to focus on this structure right here. So let's set these aside. We're going to need some corner trim and these. Okay, the first thing I've done is I took my knife and I cut the bracing off the back because I'm going to have one door open in the front, possibly even two doors. So you'll be able to see inside the shop. So any bracing that shows, I'm going to cut that off because we no longer need it. The bracing's there just to prevent wood from warping while you stain it. Be very, very careful if you decide to do this. You don't want to break the wall. Go very, very slow. Okay, that's good. Now I'm just going to take some bittersweet chocolate. I want to paint the inside of the wall so that if you see in there, it's not just bare wood. We're going to quick file all of our edges so they're nice and smooth. Now it's up to you. You can put your corner trim on first or wait until you have the walls assembled. I don't have my lines to use to make sure this is straight, so now I am going to put my corner trim on this piece because I cut the bracing off of both of those, so there's no real way to line it up without having the corner trim on it. Okay, let's give that a second to dry. Okay, the structure is put together. Now we just have to do our doors and windows. So all of the doors and windows are on here. Now I'm going to cut the big door in half so that I can have at least one of them open. Since we're going to have one of the doors open, it'll be like that. So that gets put on there. And normally you would put them both side by side, just like that. Well, I'm going to have one door open, so I'm going to have that facing forward. So I'm going to spray the back of this, that reddish brown primer. So we'll have that one open, and then the one next to it we'll have that one closed or maybe slightly open. Okay, we have all of our doors and windows and door frames all cut out. I painted the back of that door. Now we're going to take iced coffee. I really like this color because it is a great wood color. It's kind of a grayish tan. And we're just going to sponge to make it look like all the paint is chipping off of all of this. You don't want to go too heavy. Light. You want small dots. If it's too big, it sometimes looks out of scale. And of course on door frames, you're going to want to go heavier at the bottom than at the top. Okay, I just took my sponge and did some sponging of bittersweet chocolate. Any dark brown will work, but very little, just very little towards the top. I then did very little on the structure. Okay, now let's get all of this glued on there. And I recommend first putting acetate, gluing acetate to the windows, then gluing it all on the structure. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm painting the inside of the doors and windows and a little bit on the front, just in case any of it shows. I feel like this is going to be a long video. There's just a lot of steps, especially if you want it to look really nice. And again, I'm just painting right on the face of, or the front of the structure, in case that trim doesn't quite go to the edge. It should, but if you glue it over to one side more than the other side, and a little bit shows you want it to be brown. So I'm starting to glue the acetate in the windows, and I wanted to show you this quick. I cut the back side of the acetate with my knife and then actually cut some pieces out to make it look like it's broken. And notice I even dry brushed the door handle. Door handle was painted with light metal. It's a dry brush paint from Ammo. Okay, here's our structure so far. Now, I quickly did a test fitting on here, and I mismeasured. So it hangs off. And the reason why it hangs off, and it hangs off exactly 1/8 of an inch, and I know why, because when I designed this, I simply did not put corner trim on it. I designed it to be built so that this is the front wall and this is the back wall, and the side walls get glued in between those. So what I did now, it's a mistake, but I will show you. I'm just going to draw squares for the corner trim. And as you can see, that adds a 1/16 of an inch to both sides, which equals 1/8, and that's why it hangs off. So you actually do not need to add corner trim. Just glue your two side walls on the inside so that it's flush. Hopefully that makes sense. If you do, if you're building it along with me and you've already added your corner trim, it's not a problem. It sits right here on the corner and it'll hang off 1/8 of an inch, which is on the back side. It's not noticeable, but hopefully you watch this video all the way through before you start building yours, and you just don't need to add the corner trim, and it'll fit perfectly in this corner. Okay, let's continue with this, and we'll add the roof card. So here's the roof card that you get in the kit. We want this section right here. Okay, so these two big ones are for these two sides, and then this one on the end is for here, and then there's a little pop-out structure on the side, and that's the roof card right there. I'm going to spray it. I'm just going to quick spray it with that reddish brown primer on the underside. Real quick, before I put the roof on, I'm going to put a beam right there. Now we can glue on our roof cards. Okay, I just added trim to the front and to the back. All right, let's set this aside. We're going to work on something else, but we'll need to come back and add the roofing on top of this, which is actually going to be sheet metal. Okay, so now let's work on this small structure here that gets put on the side. Now this one does get corner trim put on it. Now again, I cut the bracing very carefully, slice the bracing off on this wall, and we're going to paint it, because that gets put right there, and from the front looking in you can see a little bit of that wall. So now I'm going to take the sky or gray sky that we did on the interior there, and just real quick we'll put it on here. Now you don't have to do this, it barely shows, but we have a lot of detail parts that are going on the inside, so for photographing I want this to be gray in there so that when I photograph it that you can see that wall. Now before I forget, I'm going to paint with the gray sky the inside of this door frame. To add some interest, let's do some repaired windows. I'll show you in a second what this looks like. Okay, now I still have to glue the bottom window in. I haven't even put acetate in it yet, but if you've already glued on the little concrete foundation for under this, just set your building on there where it goes, and that'll tell you where to glue this structure on. Now we can add trim around it. First, let's get the roof card glued on, and then we'll add our trim under the overhang. So I've cut out all of the doors and windows to complete this structure. Now, because the doors are open, or they're going to be open, we need to make sure that we paint the back side of stuff because it's going to show. So we need to paint the back side of this piece, and then we have two doors, a front door and a back door, and we need to paint the back side of those. And I think what I'm going to do is spray the back of these with a gray primer and leave them. Oh, and the vent. There's a vent that goes up here, and we need to spray the back side of that. So I'm gluing the acetate in the windows and realizing that you can see the windows when you're looking through. So I need to quick spray paint the back of those windows. I just glued together the door for this side. Actually, you can do either or, but it's meant for this side. And I made it look like it was rolled up. And so all you have to do is take your blade and just score that a little more than what it already is, and then when you glue it together, bend it, and then glue your acetate in, and we'll glue that in just like that. Now I should have put little tabs on there for you, but what I'm going to do is I took the frame of this and I sprayed the back of it gray, and I'm going to cut and make two little tabs that I glue on each side, and then glue it on from the inside. Now I sprayed the back of it gray just in case if you're photographing it and you see it through the window, it's not pure white on the back, it's actually gray. For the big door, we actually have, there's a 3D printed part in the kit. I'll have to cut it off of the supports, but it goes right there, and it's a corrugated metal door that looks like it's almost all the way up and rolled up inside there. Okay, I'm getting in all the doors and windows, and I wanted to show you that sometimes I take a thin brush with white Elmer's glue on the end and just go around the inside. If it doesn't quite, if there's some light leaking through, like around that fan. And I did the same with the door. I went around the edges of the door. It might be okay in your kit. I've noticed some fit tight, others don't. Not a big deal. I just, like I said, just take my paintbrush and take some white Elmer's glue and fill that in. And then you can paint it after it dries. I just put some glue around that window. Okay, so I just cut off 2 little pieces from that frame. Okay, they just stick out a little bit on both sides. So I carefully cut that off of the support, the little roll-up door, and put a gray primer on it. Now, I'm going to take slate gray. Okay. And a little bit of bittersweet chocolate. Okay, now we'll get it glued on. Now there's a lip on the back. So raise it up until it stops, until it hits that lip. And that's where it gets glued. And we'll just hold it there for a second. Now we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing. Now there's a texture on here from sponging, and we just want to lightly bring out that texture. Not over the entire thing, but maybe in the center here, on the columns in the corner, maybe on the edges. Once most of the paint is off, you can actually do some scrubbing. It's subtle. It's just really subtle. It almost gives it a sun-faded look. And then later we'll come in with some pastels and sort of dirty up the bottom a little bit. Now some of this will get covered with signs, so you don't have to do too much. And if you painted your structure a solid color with a brush, there's no texture on it, so you probably don't really need to do this. Okay, that is it. Again, I don't know if you can see, but I'll try to show it to you. In the kit, you'll get a brown piece of construction paper, and we're going to paint it to look like sheet metal. Now, you don't have to make it look like metal. It could be brown, a brown type of tar paper. I just thought it would give it a different look. And then the main structure will get black tar paper put on the roof. So for this one and the little one here, we're going to do sheet metal. You want to cut them different widths. So let's hold it up here. And we'll do thin, thick, thick, thin. Now we've got 1, 2, 3, we've got 4 pieces. Okay, now these may look small, but you have to keep in mind it's HO scale. Okay, so I have a piece of cardboard. It's just from a box. Now just put all the pieces on there but just the edge. You don't want to tape down the entire piece. Okay, they're all taped down. Now I'm taking bittersweet chocolate, but any dark brown would work. And we're going to go down the center of the blue. Next, we're going to take gunmetal. And we're focusing more on the center of each piece. Now I'm using a reddish rust color. And now you just want to add rust colors towards the edge of the metal. The names have worn off most of these, but there's like new rust, old rust. So now we're focusing on the edge, the bottom edge of it. Don't forget to keep rotating your sponge so you don't get a repeat pattern. Okay, now we'll get some pastels. Okay, now I'm taking slate gray and just on a few of them, lightly dragging my brush, really holding it sideways. Okay, now let's start to glue them on. The first thing you want to do is lay them out in a row to make sure that it fits. So just start picking some random sizes. Okay, that works. Alright, now I'll do the other side, and then we'll do this side. And then we'll have to cut some small ones, or just take some thin ones and fold them over and cap the top. Okay, next we're going to work on all of the fencing. And this is going to take a while. My plan is to sponge 3 different colors onto this. First, we're going to start with neutral gray. Then we'll move to gunmetal. And then light metal. I did want to mention that I took the trim off around that upper window. It just looked out of place and really didn't make sense for the structure being like stucco or a smooth concrete. There would be no trim. You can see in the back there's no trim around the doors or the windows. So I took that off in the front. Okay, so let's get on to our fencing. I'm going to do all of this with a sponge. And again, we're going to start with neutral gray. Okay, our first color is done. And it takes a while because you need to sponge the front, then the back, then take a brush and dab it on the top of all the rails and then on both sides. So you need to cover the entire thing. Okay, next, gunmetal. Now we're going to do less of this color. This, we'll use it a little bit more sparingly. Okay, now for the last color, the light metal. And we don't want to do a lot of this. We just want to hit some of the edges. And maybe the top of the posts. No, we're going to glue a sign over the top of this. That's why I haven't painted it. We're just hitting the edges. Now the next step is to apply the screen to these. In the kit there is a mesh. If you want to spray a gray primer on that now and let that dry, we're going to do that in a minute. But the first thing we want to do, because we need to handle these, and if we put the mesh on here, they become a little bit fragile. So let me show you what we're going to do. We're going to take our base and we're going to weather it. So we want to put dirt where we think natural dirt would be from truck pulling into the two stalls, foot traffic. So let's go ahead and dirty this up. And then there's areas, you'll see there's already holes in here. So we may want to put a little bit of rust on the concrete underneath the fence, some dirt around it, same with the back piece. So let's go ahead and take some browns and grays and dirty this up a little bit. Now we have a drain that goes right here too, and so we're going to want to put some dirt around that, maybe some oil drips on here. Okay, it looks like kind of a mess right now, but once we get our junk and other stuff put on there, it's all going to blend together. Okay, now we'll set that aside and let's get back to our fencing. Okay, I sprayed a primer on my mesh, both sides. Now I'm just going to sponge on some rust, and I'm just going to go towards the bottom. Now you want to be careful because you don't want it to fill in any of the diamond shapes. It's not going to show up a lot, but we do want a little bit of rust on it. Okay, now we'll start with the front piece. Oh, why not just go for the back piece? Let's do that. Okay, we're going to set it where we want it. We're going to flip it over. I don't know why. I kind of got in a hurry and just started doing it, but we're going to want to cut this. I feel like I should start over filming this, but you're seeing me learn how to do this as I'm doing it, which hopefully is helpful. Okay, I've taped it down, which you should do first, and then we cut one straight edge, and I've marked it, and I'm going to cut a second straight edge. Okay, I'm going to flip it back over because the rust is on this side. Hopefully my super glue hasn't dried. Okay, perfect. Now we'll let this dry, and then I'll trim the ends and trim the opening for the gate. Okay, I'm going to put two, and then after it dries we'll cut it. So I'm taking this piece, and the long post fits down in the base, and the short one sticks up. Put that on the edge right there, and then same with this one. Now we're going to do the gates. And let me think about what side. Okay. Now this piece should be ready, and we'll just trim it. Notice I left a little bit extra at the top. I don't have this glued in, but it's just sitting there. But I just wanted to show it to you quick. Before we move on, I just wanted to show you an easier way maybe to do the fencing. So first decide what side you want your screen on. So I want it on the back side. So that side gets face down. On this one, we want it on the back side. So again, flip that down. This goes back in the corner. We want it on the outside, so that gets flipped down. And that one, we would want it on the inside, so we want that like that. Okay, now, So we want to glue the screen to the back. Then you're going to want to take straight pins and put those in the corners. And do that on all your pieces. Right now, all you need is 4, 1 in each corner. Then, after you've got your screen primed and you've got some rust put on it, put some glue. Well, you could put this on. Yeah, I would say put this on first. Okay. The pins go after you've got the screen down. So lay your screen down, then pull it kind of tight. Make sure it's tight enough that there's no waves in it where it's lifted. Okay, then you could, if you wanted to, take white Elmer's glue and dab it on there. And spread it out. It dries clear, so spread that out. And then while it's on there, pull it tight and put some more pins. Pull it tight, put a pin. And if it's raised in areas, you can, well, if it's thick enough, you can push that pin all the way down to hold that screen tight down on there. There you go. And then just set this to the side and let it dry. And then take all your pins out, flip it over, take your X-Acto knife and trim all the extra off. And you're done. All right, I just wanted to show you that because I know the way I did it was super complicated and it was like the hardest way to do it, and it took a while, and I didn't want to discourage you. There's an easier, much easier way to do it. In the kit, you'll receive a bunch of signs, and of course, being a scrap metal yard, it's going to be all metal. So what I did was I sprayed the back of it with a gray primer. Now we'll add a bunch of rust and then cut all these out. And some will be on the building, some will just be leaning up against the fence. It's just scrap metal. So I'm taking bittersweet chocolate and a sponge and just adding rust. Now you may want to go heavy with some and lighter with others. I like to focus on the corners. I feel I have a little bit more control using tweezers and the sponge rather than just grabbing it with my hand. For some reason, I use a little bit more of a delicate touch when I use the tweezers. We could even try some burnt sienna. Just to add a little variety to the signs. Now, we have to cut these all out. Alright, I won't make you watch. I'll cut these out. And then we'll come back and we need to color the edges with a dark brown marker. Okay, I primed a bunch of the detail parts. Now, I've only got 16 here. Now, there's over 25 detail parts in the kit. So, let's start painting these because some of them, they go up on the rooftops, and we're not ready for the roof yet. Okay, well, as you can see, I've got some of the details painted, and I'm gluing them where they go. Let me take the camera off and give you a little closer look. Okay, all of our little signs are finished. So now let's glue some onto the structure, and then we'll glue some sitting along the fence. Okay, we have our signs glued in place. And we put some on the inside. All right, let's get this structure glued on there. Okay, we set our newspapers to the side, and that might be the last thing we do, is to add crumpled up newspaper here and there for detail. The next thing we're going to do is something really fun. We're going to paint some more details. And there is a metal rack that has steel bars and pipes on it. There is a shelf that goes on the inside of the garage. And we have a workbench that's really detailed. You can actually see the tools on it. And the pegboard. So let's get these painted. Now take your time when cutting the supports off. You want to be careful that you don't break off any of the legs or any little details. Now it's kind of cool because a piece like this, you could paint that and rust it and put that setting in the yard somewhere as just a rusty piece, like an old gate or security bars for windows. I think we'll do that. So just take your time, don't force anything. You don't want anything to break. There's our shelving unit. Okay, this one may take a little bit of time. It makes a mess, I know, but wow, this one is, I didn't realize how hard this was. Let's cut some of these from the bottom. That'll help break it off in smaller pieces. This may be the hardest part of the entire build. Man, I apologize. I maybe should have designed this differently. I should have maybe printed it laying flat on its back instead of upright. It's all coming apart. You just have to be patient and take your time. A brand new blade helps. Okay, there is the rack. Again, I apologize that I should have designed that differently. I wish I would have printed those laying flat. It would have taken me longer because I would have gotten as many on a single plate, but it would have been better. I had a few little cracks, a few little breaks. Not bad. So, I know this is not plastic, it's resin, so I don't know if this is going to work. I'm just going over the back of it, making sure that it's flat. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. Okay, then I had 3 little spots that cracked. Alright, now we'll save a few of these and add some rust to them. Yeah, I don't think the this cement works on resin. I used the super glue and it seemed to work fine. All right, we'll get a primer on everything, even the roof vents and smokestacks, and then we'll get all this painted. Okay, I'm going to start by painting the shelving unit, the workbench, and the metal rack. And I am going to do blue. And I'm going to do probably 50-50 of Blue Harbor and Desert Turquoise. Now with the metal rack, you could do the safety orange, sort of give it a Home Depot look. But again, I'm going to go with the blue. You know, after you get a primer on this stuff, a lot of times you'll notice that there's stuff that you missed cleaning it up. I missed a little bit on the bottoms. Okay, this is going to take a while. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this all blue and then take a sponge and sponge a little bit of rust on, just a dark brown. So to start with, you want to just first go over it as if you're dry brushing. And then I am just kind of dabbing it on the shelves to make it look like at one time it was all blue, but over time the paint has scratched off and now it's just gray. Another piece of advice, well, let me finish my thought on this. After it's dried, like, do that to all your pieces. Treat it as if you're just sort of dry brushing it, going over it. Then go back and do it a little heavier and take your time and really go over the edges. But at first you're just trying to get a rough base coat down. Now what I was going to mention was that when you put a primer on these, don't use a hair dryer to speed up the drying time. The resin will heat up and warp. So don't use a hair dryer. I know in the past I've used hair dryers, but that's only on plastic pieces. I suppose if it got hot enough, a plastic piece would also warp. But the resin will definitely, it won't take much heat and you'll see it start to distort. Okay, our stuff is painted. Now we just want to add a little bit of rust. Not a lot, especially on the stuff that's inside the garage. So I just glued the gooseneck lamp on there. Glued that piece in place. That was the support off of one of our 3D printed pieces. And then crumpled up some newspaper and glued it in different spots. Next, let's glue our metal rack to the side of the structure. Pretty straightforward. I am gonna file the back of it just to make sure it's nice and flat. So you just want to center it. Hold it for a second. Now let's go ahead and glue this structure on there. Now if you see any glue seeping out, clean it up. Check the inside. Okay, now let's get our details on the inside glued in. We're going to put this back in the corner. Okay, next we're going to build some pallets. And here's a finished one. So the first thing we want to do is cut out the end pieces. Don't cut out all of the boards yet because we're going to build it right on the sheet. So first, cut out all of the ends. So each pallet gets 3 of these. And I'll show you, they get glued 1 on each side and 1 down the center, going the opposite direction of the boards. Okay, so first we want to cut out all of those pieces. It goes pretty quick and it's a really great detail. You get 5 pallets total. Now you want to flip it over because we're going to glue them from the back side. Now you want to be careful because these can go flying by snapping your tweezers. So there's a dark side and a light side, and you see that? It just flung, so I lost one. So I was saying that there's a dark side and a light side. Make sure that the dark side faces out. You know, the easiest thing to do now, when these all dry, we'll cut out the boards and then the whole piece will lift out, and then we just flip it over and glue it to the other side. Just remember, the dark side faces out. Unless you could do it the opposite. You could have the light side facing out and the light side of the boards facing up. I'm going to dry brush a lighter color, so I want a dark base. Now we'll let that dry really good. I didn't build the last one because I already have one built. This was sort of my prototype. So again, we'll let this dry really good, and then we'll come back and carefully cut all those boards. And then what we can do is we can just flip it over and glue it to the next side. So hopefully that makes sense, because the other side will look like this. And notice on this piece you have the fan, which we already glued in the back. I cut it off another piece. When we put the roof card on this one, there's a sign, and these are the supports for the sign. And then the actual sign will go right there. Then we have a little meter that goes anywhere on the side of the structure. And then we have a square with boards engraved, and that's for the water tower that sits on top right here. Okay, I just ran my blade along both sides, so these should pop out. So that's what it looks like so far. And then all you have to do is flip it over and glue it to those boards. And then after it dries, run your blade along and it's done. Okay, I found the best way to do this is with a brush. Now you could break out some of the boards, break them in half. You could have these look really busted up if you wanted. Okay, we'll let those dry, then we cut it out and it'll be done. Okay, the pallets are all done. Now I'm just going to simply dry brush them with iced coffee. Now you can take red and blue and paint the ends. I don't know what the colors signify, but A lot of times you'll see the ends colored with like red or blue. Okay, I've gotten a little bit more work done. I got this side of the roof finished. The water tank is very simple. It's made up of these two pieces right here. Those are the side pieces, and that's the front. And then the top is this square right there. Okay, next we have two more roofs to put on. Oh, and I did add two signs. All right, for these two rooftops, this one you'll see has the notch cut out of it. That fits right on there. And you probably noticed I sprayed both sides with a gray primer. It sort of helps seal the cardboard and keeps it a little bit more stable and prevents it from warping a little bit. So these go on like this. And then we have a sign that goes on the rooftop right here. And that has supports. Well, the sign itself gets glued onto that piece right there. And then the supports are over here. But there's an option with the roofing. Because we have so much detail on the inside, if you want, in the kit, you'll get these two pieces. Now, the two small windows are for the large windows. Take these off for a second. The bottom one here that is open, and there's one in the back that's open. Those are those two windows right there. Now these, you have three on the top, and then below it is a double one. You can add skylights. So the one that has three can be centered right there. And then this one gets the double, and it can be centered. I would put it towards the back because our door is rolled up and it goes maybe halfway back. So you want to put those windows towards the back. Now there's a frame right here. So I'm going to show you quick how to add these. The first thing we're going to want to do is cut these out. Okay, then take your roof card. I'm going to put the gray side down. So we want to center that on there. And you can use a ruler and center it. It doesn't have to be centered this way. You can have it a little bit lower if you want. I'm putting mine 3/8 from the bottom. Now, you want your pencil to be really sharp, so I'm going to quick sharpen this. So put it exactly where you want it. And trace the inside. Don't worry about the center pieces. We just want a rectangle. Now we'll take our blade and cut that out. And you probably want to go to the outside of your pencil line. You could either cut directly on the pencil line or just to the outside of it. I need to trim mine a little bit. So you want that frame to sit just like that. Now I did not cut this out on the kit itself because I wanted to give you the option to leave it, and there's a vent that you could cut and put in there if you wanted to, or you can put the sunroof. I'll quick show you what this is going to look like. We'll cut this one out. So this gets glued on top of this. And then this gets glued on top of your roof guard. And then we'll do the same on this. And again, keep it towards the back half. I would say, again, go 3/8 of an inch from the back. Now this one I sprayed both sides. So your notch is up in the corner, and your window then is 3/8 from the bottom. So again, we're just going to trace the inside I thought it'd be a good time to mention that the two windows here, I know I just talked about this, they go on the bottom of those two. The two windows that are next to it are just small extra windows, and I actually put acetate in those and broke them up and cracked them. And then there's one in the back. So they're just extra. Okay, let's get this painted and get our tar paper on there and get them glued in place. I spray painted both sides of everything with a reddish brown primer. Now we'll set the frames aside, and we're going to take these and sponge on some gray, and I'm using neutral gray. Now we'll hit the outer edges with light metal, a silver. Give it a metal look. I forgot to show you, but before I glued these together, I laid the frame on clear acetate and cut out all of my pieces of glass that fit in there. So each square fits in from the back side. Okay, the skylights are in. And I added a sign to the front. All that's left to do is to build our tow truck. Here are all the parts for the tow truck. And took my file and just cleaned up all the pieces. On the cables that run here, just put your finger on top of them and slowly file them smooth. I did a little bit of filing on the wheels. Not much cleanup is necessary. They're pretty clean. Alright, let's get a primer on these. Now that our gray primer is on, let's take some bittersweet chocolate Okay, here is the finished model. It does come with a black cable that goes from here and up and over and hangs down. I just haven't put it on yet. Let me take the camera off and give you a closer look. I hope you enjoyed today's video. This was such a fun build. And I wanted to let you know that this actually took me a week to build. So it's not a quick build for sure. All right, well again, this is available on my website at jasonjensentrains.com. Now keep in mind there's only 150 kits. Funny story, my wife wanted me to do 175, and I told her for my first limited edition kit, I'll be lucky to sell what I've got. Well, you know, 99% of the time she is correct, so chances are I probably should have done 175, but oh well, there's 150, they're available now. All right, thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. And a huge, huge thank you, like always, to all of my Patreons. Now, if you are a Patreon, you receive a discount. Like every kit that I put out, all of my Patreons receive a discount. And that discount code can be found on my Patreon page at patreon.com/Jason Jensen Trains. All right, well, thank you all so much for watching. And hey, if you haven't already, please take a moment and subscribe to the channel. All right, well, until next time, stay motivated and happy modeling, everyone.